10 Things You Realize When You Finally Stop Chasing by David Russo. Chapter 1. The Difference Between Desire and Desperation. You don't have to silence your ambition. Just stop letting it consume you. We're taught from a young age that if you want something, you have to chase it, hustle for it, push harder, want it more than anyone else. And while that mindset may help you hit certain goals, it also comes with a hidden cost. The belief that if you stop chasing, you'll somehow lose everything, your edge, your purpose, your value. But there's a difference, a big one, between healthy desire and unhealthy desperation. It's not about whether you have ambition. It's about where the ambition is coming from. Desire is grounded. It feels like direction. It's a quiet pull, not a frantic scramble. When you're acting from desire, you move because it feels aligned, not because you're afraid of what happens if you don't. You can rest, you can breathe, and you can still believe it's coming. Desperation, on the other hand, is noisy. It feels like trying to fill a hole. You chase success, love, status, approval, not because they're deeply meaningful to you, but because you hope they'll fix something inside. You keep thinking, if I just get this next thing, maybe I'll finally feel okay. But it never lasts. The goalposts keep moving. The anxiety doesn't go away. And deep down, it doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like a compulsion. When you stop chasing, you start to see the difference clearly. You start to realize that the energy behind the pursuit matters more than the pursuit itself. You can want to grow, achieve, love, and expand, and still do it from a place of calm self-worth. You can have ambition that doesn't eat you alive. You can want more without hating where you are. You don't have to silence your ambition. Just stop letting it consume you. That's the trap. We believe chasing makes us worthy, that if we slow down, if we step back, we'll lose everything. But the truth is, some of your best insights, your clearest choices, your deepest peace won't arrive until you do slow down, until you stop moving long enough to ask, why am I doing all this in the first place? Sometimes the chase itself becomes the distraction. It gives us something to focus on so we don't have to face the harder questions. What if I never feel enough? What if success doesn't actually make me happy? What if I'm afraid of what happens when I finally get still? But here's the secret no one tells you. When you stop chasing, you don't lose your power, you reclaim it. Because suddenly, you're not making decisions out of fear. You're not trying to earn love or prove yourself. You're not acting from panic. You're choosing from presence. That's the shift. You go from chasing to choosing. And that's where things really start to change. The job doesn't feel like a lifeline. It becomes an opportunity. The relationship doesn't feel like validation. It becomes a partnership. Success stops being your identity. It becomes a tool. When you're not desperate to fill a void, you get clear on what actually fits. You stop reaching for anything just to feel full. You start asking, does this align with who I'm becoming? Not just can this prove I'm enough. Desire guided by peace feels very different than desire fueled by lack. You'll still work hard. You'll still dream big. But the energy shifts from force to flow, from panic to purpose. And slowly, the things you once chased start to find their way to you. Not because you chased harder, but because you finally made space for what's real. Chapter 2. Stillness isn't stagnation. You're not falling behind just because you're standing still. The moment you stop moving, really stop, is often when the panic creeps in. It's subtle at first, the restlessness, the guilt, the sense that you're wasting time. The voice in your head says, you should be doing more. You should be further along. You're not trying hard enough. We live in a world that equates stillness with failure. If you're not striving, producing, or pushing forward, it can feel like you're getting left behind. So we fill our calendars We chase milestones. We keep moving, sometimes not because we know where we're going, but because we're too afraid of what might rise to the surface if we stopped. But here's the truth. Stillness is not the same as stagnation. Stopping to breathe, to reflect, to rest, that's not laziness. That's wisdom. It's what allows you to reconnect with yourself, to reassess what you're actually doing and why. Without that pause, it's easy to keep climbing the wrong ladder, chasing someone else's dream, or running from your own discomfort. When you finally stop chasing, stillness stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like peace. You begin to see that so much of the noise in your life was just that, noise. It wasn't guidance. It wasn't clarity. It was distraction. It was urgency without direction. And you realize how long you've been reacting instead of choosing. Stillness gives you the space to hear your own voice again. It's where you reconnect with your intuition, the quiet knowing that gets drowned out by the pressure to keep up. It's in the still moments that you often discover what truly matters to you. The goals that were just ego, the relationships that were one-sided, the habits that were rooted in fear, not intention. And once you have that awareness, you start moving differently. You realize that forward isn't always fast, that growth isn't always visible, that sometimes the most important work happens when nothing looks like it's happening on the outside. Like healing, like grieving, like recalibrating, like letting go of the version of you that was built around chasing and learning how to just be. That's not stagnation, that's transformation. But it doesn't feel glamorous. It's not something you can post or quantify. It's quiet, unseen, and in a culture that worships productivity, that kind of inner shift can feel invisible, even invalid. You might find yourself asking, am I doing enough? But the real question is, am I being honest with myself? Stillness asks you to sit with what is. No distractions, no performing, just presence. And while that can be uncomfortable, it's also where the clarity lives. It's where your next step, the one that actually matters, starts to reveal itself. Not because you forced it, but because you waited long enough to recognize it. Eventually, you start to trust stillness. You stop seeing it as wasted time and start seeing it as essential space. You stop fearing the pause and start protecting it. Because here's the secret. When you allow yourself to be still, you move forward with so much more power. Not rushed, not reactive, but rooted. The world will still tell you to go faster, to chase more, to stay relevant, but you'll know better. You'll know that the real work happens not in the sprint, but in the silence. And you'll begin to understand something that changes everything. You're not falling behind. You're falling into alignment. Chapter 3. Not everything that comes late is lost. Delayed doesn't mean denied. There's a quiet panic that creeps in when life doesn't arrive on schedule. Maybe it's the job that didn't happen by 30. The relationship that still hasn't shown up, the dream that feels stalled in the middle of its becoming. You start wondering if you missed your chance, or worse, if you were never meant for it at all. Because in the chase, we're conditioned to believe that faster is better, that sooner means more successful, and that if something hasn't happened yet, it probably never will. But when you finally stop chasing, you start to question all of that. You start to see that some things need time, not because you're doing it wrong, but because you're growing into the version of yourself that can truly receive and hold what you've asked for. The delay wasn't punishment, it was preparation. What no one tells you is that rushing toward a goal before you're ready can cost more than waiting. You can end up in the right situation at the wrong time, and it won't feel right. You won't be able to appreciate it, handle it, or grow with it, because some part of you skipped the necessary becoming. Sometimes the late arrival is the most perfectly timed gift. because now you have the capacity to hold it and not lose yourself in it. When you're always chasing, you're constantly measuring yourself against timelines, where you thought you'd be by now, where other people are. What society tells you is on time, but none of that takes into account your actual life, your actual path, your actual needs. And when you stop running, you realize something simple but radical. Life is not a race, it's a rhythm. You don't get to control the beat, but you do get to learn how to move with it. There are seasons where everything blooms fast and bright, but there are also seasons where the soil works in silence, where nothing looks alive on the surface, but everything is growing beneath. Just because it's not happening yet doesn't mean it's not happening. Just because they got it before you doesn't mean you're behind. Just because it's taking longer than you planned doesn't mean you're off track. In fact, some of the most meaningful parts of your life will happen outside the bounds of your original plan. Letting go of the timeline isn't giving up on the dream. It's giving up on the pressure that's been strangling it. You learn to trust that what's meant for you doesn't need to be chased down. It needs to be prepared for. And the most powerful preparation often doesn't look like hustle. It looks like healing, like learning, like building the strength, wisdom, and emotional capacity to receive what you once only knew how to want. This shift from chasing to trusting is where the anxiety begins to ease, because suddenly it's not about if something will happen, it's about becoming the version of you who will know what to do when it does. There's a softness that comes with that kind of faith, a quiet power. You're no longer panicked every time life takes a detour. You stop questioning your worth every time something takes longer than expected. You stop assuming that waiting means failure. Because now you know, not everything that comes late is lost. Some things just needed you to slow down long enough to receive them fully. Chapter 4. People who stay don't need convincing. Real connection doesn't require performance. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from constantly trying to earn love. Maybe you know the feeling, the unspoken pressure to prove your worth in relationships, to always be interesting enough, agreeable enough, useful enough to be kept around. You learn to read between the lines. You edit yourself mid-sentence. You anticipate needs before they're voiced. You become a version of yourself you think you will be more lovable, more acceptable, less, too much. And maybe for a while, it works. You're praised for being easy to be around, for not making things complicated, for how well you fit in. But inside, something feels off. It's subtle at first. A quiet dullness, a sense of disconnection, a growing resentment that you can't quite name. When you stop chasing, really stop, you begin to see how much of your energy was being spent on trying to belong in places where your full self never actually felt safe. You realize the people who are truly meant to stay in your life will never ask you to shrink to fit. They won't require performance. They won't reward your silence over your honesty. They won't mistake boundaries for rejection. And they won't withhold love as a form of control. When you stop chasing people, you stop auditioning for a connection. You begin to understand that real relationships, the ones that nourish you, are built on mutual presence, not pursuit. You don't have to constantly reach for someone who's reaching back. You also start to notice how often you were the one initiating, the one carrying the emotional weight, the one following up, fixing things, smoothing over conflict to keep the connection intact. And you ask yourself, what happens if I stop? What happens if I stop texting first? If I stop showing up just to prove I'm worth staying for? If I stop managing other people's comfort to the expense of my own truth? What happens is this: the dynamics reveal themselves. Some people disappear, and not because you did something wrong, but because the relationship was never as mutual as you hoped. Some stay, but the energy shifts. Things feel more balanced, and some, surprisingly, begin to show up more once the chasing stops and space is created for actual reciprocity. Because when you stop chasing people, you stop confusing availability with alignment. You realize that just because someone's present doesn't mean they're healthy for you. And just because you can win someone over doesn't mean they're someone you should have to win. There is a world of difference between being chosen and being safe. Real connection doesn't demand that you stay small. It welcomes your fullness, your flaws, your changes, your boundaries, your needs. It doesn't require constant reassurance that you're good enough because the right people already see that in you. And when you start believing that for yourself, everything changes. You begin to attract from wholeness, not wounding. You stop settling for crumbs of attention just to avoid loneliness. You stop trying to force friendships, relationships, or partnerships to be more than they're willing or able to be. You let people go kindly but clearly when they show you that they don't value you. And in that letting go, you make room for new people, for deeper connections, for the kind of love that feels like rest, not labor. Because love, real love, shouldn't feel like a full-time job where you're constantly at risk of being let go. It should feel like home. And the ones who are meant to walk with you, they don't need to be convinced. They choose you, not for your performance, but for your presence. Chapter 5. You're already enough without the achievement. Who you are isn't defined by what you do. It's easy to confuse achievement with identity, to wear your accomplishments like armor, hoping they'll protect you from self-doubt or the fear of not being good enough. So you chase titles, degrees, promotions, recognition. You check every box, and for a moment, it feels like it works. People applaud. You feel seen, validated, proud. But then the high fades, and suddenly, it doesn't feel like enough anymore. The finish line moves. The next goal calls, and the cycle starts again. Maybe if I just do a little more, I'll finally feel like I'm enough. When you finally stop chasing, especially chasing external validation, you begin to see how much of your self-worth was tied to performance. You start asking the question that achievement alone can't answer. Who am I when I'm not accomplishing anything? At first, it's a hard question, sometimes even painful, because when you've built your value around doing, slowing down can feel like losing yourself. You're so used to being productive, impressive, or useful that just being, resting, existing, breathing feels unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. But with time, something powerful begins to happen. You realize that your value was never in what you achieved. It was always in who you are. You begin to see your worth as something stable, not a prize you have to earn, not a reaction from others, not a fragile identity built on success or status. You are worthy even when you're resting, even when you're unsure, even when no one is watching, praising, or applauding. This isn't an excuse to give up on your goals. It's a reminder that you don't need them to define you. Achievement can be an expression of who you are, but it doesn't have to be your entire sense of self. When you're no longer chasing to prove something, you actually create from a much purer place. Your work becomes more intentional. Your goals become more aligned. You stop asking, will this make me look successful? And start asking, does this feel right for me? You also stop settling for validation dressed as love. When your worth is tied to your achievements, you may attract people who are only interested in your shine, not your soul. But when you embrace your enoughness, you naturally create boundaries around the kind of energy you allow into your life. You stop overworking to be seen, over-delivering to be valued, overachieving to feel lovable. You start choosing rest without guilt. You start celebrating yourself without needing an audience. You start showing up as someone who is already whole, not someone trying to earn their way to wholeness. And here's what's beautiful. When you live from that place, achievement still happens. But it's no longer the foundation of your identity. It's just one of the many ways your light gets expressed in the world. You begin to define success differently. Less about accolades, more about alignment. Less about proving, more about living fully and honestly. You realize your enoughness was never up for debate. It was only something you had to come back to. And now that you've stopped chasing, you finally have the space to remember it. Chapter 6, The Mirage of Control. You can shape your journey, but you don't need to suffocate it. When you're in pursuit mode, it's easy to believe that if you hustle hard enough, strategize long enough, and push relentlessly, you can lock in your desired outcome. You craft vision boards, lay out 5-year timelines, triple check your calendars and contingency plans. And when life doesn't follow the script, you blame yourself. You spiral. You cling tighter. You treat every delay like a defeat and every twist as a sign of failure. But eventually, whether through heartbreak, burnout, or simply growing tired, you come to a deeper truth. You never held the reins. What you had was effort. You had focus. You had agency. But control, that was never really yours. Not over people, outcomes, or timing. The more you tried to tame life like a wild animal, the more anxious you became. You thought you were staying on top of things, but really, you were just bracing for impact, anticipating every problem, managing every variable. But life doesn't move in straight lines. It flows. It bends and shifts like a river. You don't command the current. You learn how to navigate it. And that's not surrendering in defeat. It's learning to cooperate with the mystery. It's shifting from control driven by fear to guidance rooted in trust. You stop forcing and start listening. You set goals, but hold them loosely. You take action, but detach from rigid outcomes. You say, "This is where I'm headed, and I trust that what aligns will stay, and what doesn't will step aside." That shift isn't giving up power. It's understanding where your power really lies. Control is often fear in disguise. Fear of falling short, of uncertainty, of being unloved if everything doesn't go exactly to plan. But once you drop the illusion, something opens up. You realize you're still standing, even when things fell apart. You begin to trust yourself not to control the storm, but to move through it. Letting go doesn't mean chaos. It means space for growth, for beauty you didn't expect, for grace to show up without a formal invitation. It means releasing relationships that are ready to end, letting go of how others perceive you, no longer managing your life like a performance review. You make room for surprise, for mistakes, for being human. And above all, you let yourself exhale, because the constant effort to hold everything together is exhausting. And when you finally loosen your grip, you can focus on what's truly yours to manage: your energy, your presence, your choices. That's your real power, not in outmaneuvering life, but in meeting it with steadiness. Control never promised peace, but trust in your resilience, in your process, in life's timing does. And in the stillness that follows the chase, you finally understand. Letting go isn't the end of the dream. It's the beginning of your freedom. Chapter 7, Energy is the True Wealth. What you feed with your energy is what takes root, and what drains you is what keeps you empty. When you're caught in the pursuit, whether it's love, clarity, validation, or success, you really stop to ask, what's this really costing me? not just in hours, but in attention, in calm, in well-being. Because your energy is your most precious asset, more than money, more than time, it's the fuel for your thoughts, your actions, your relationships, the essence of how you move through each day. But in constant chase mode, your energy splinters. You scatter it across every what if, every unavailable person, every unaligned yes. And the irony? The more you chase, the less fulfilled you feel. Because chasing is usually reactive, not rooted. It's not intentional motion, it's frantic momentum. It's giving beyond your capacity, overanalyzing every step, and still feeling like it's never enough. Eventually, you hit a threshold, you burn out, or you simply wake up and realize, I'm exhausted from trying to earn something that was never meant to be forced. That's when the shift begins, the realization that energy isn't infinite and it's not free. Every yes to what doesn't serve you is a no to something that might. Every time you pour yourself into proving your worth, you deplete the part of you that already is worthy. So you stop chasing and start conserving. You start treating your energy like the sacred currency it is, something to invest with discernment, not out of scarcity, but out of self respect. You start asking sharper questions. Is this life giving or life leaking? Am I saying yes out of fear or alignment? Does this nourish me or just drain me slowly? Little by little, things change. The fatigue begins to lift. The inner noise quiets. You begin to feel your strength return. Not because you're doing more, but because you've stopped doing what empties you. You become intentional about your spaces, your people, your time. Not from fear, but from knowing the cost of depletion. You no longer chase the emotionally unavailable. You stop forcing what your gut has already let go of. You quit recycling mental energy into conversations and outcomes that only leave you drained. This isn't selfishness, it's sovereignty. Because when your energy is protected, your clarity sharpens, your peace stabilizes, your creativity breathes again. And something beautiful happens. You start attracting what aligns, not because you're chasing it, but because you've become anchored. You're not performing anymore. You're choosing. You're moving with grounded clarity, not chaotic need. You still want things. You still strive. But now, your efforts come from fullness, not fear, from discernment, not desperation. You're no longer running yourself ragged, trying to prove you're enough. You already know you are. And that changes everything because when you lead with wholeness, you walk lighter, you rest deeper, you give more freely to what's right, real, and reciprocal. And nothing's more powerful than that. Chapter 8. The right things find you when you're not distracted. Sometimes you're too busy chasing the wrong thing to receive the right one. There's a quiet kind of blindness that comes from constant pursuit. When you're always focused on what's next, the next goal, the next relationship, the next version of your life that might finally feel like enough, you really notice what's already around you. You become so consumed with trying to reach something that you miss the signs of what's already reaching for you. We don't talk about that enough, how chasing can become its own distraction, not just from rest or presence, but from receiving, from seeing clearly what's right in front of you because you're so fixated on what you think you're supposed to want. It's not the things you're chasing are wrong, it's that the way you're going after them leaves no room for anything else to arrive. You're gripping, forcing, running, and in all that noise, you can't hear what life might actually be trying to tell you. When you finally stop chasing, even for a moment, the fog begins to clear. You start to see what was always there. The opportunities, people, clarity, and peace that were too quiet to be noticed when your life was moving at 100 miles an hour. You realize that some of the best things aren't loud. They don't scream for your attention. They arrive softly, gently. They need space to land. But when you're constantly distracted by proving something to the world, to your parents, to your past self, you don't leave much room for surprise or grace or alignment. You leave room for effort. And that's not always where the magic lives. The right things don't need to be chased down. They unfold, they align, they meet you, but only when you're not too distracted to receive them. Think of how many times you've overlooked something beautiful because you were looking for something else. How often have you ignored your intuition because you were trying to make a plan work? How many times have you tried to force a relationship, a job, or an outcome, only to realize later that you missed the deeper invitation underneath it? When you slow down, when you stop chasing, your vision returns. You notice the people who show up without being asked. You hear the ideas that float in when you're not forcing them. You receive answers without digging for them. And slowly, you stop chasing things that were never yours in the first place. You let the doors close that never truly opened. You stop refreshing the inbox, the messages, the metrics. You learn to sit in this stillness long enough to realize you don't need more noise. You need more truth. Here's the truth. Not everything you want is meant to be yours, and that's okay. Sometimes the delay, the detour, or the ending is actually the clearing, the space you need for something more aligned to find you. And it will find you, but not when you're distracted, not when you're gripping so tightly to a version of the future that doesn't fit who you're becoming. It will find you when you're present, when you're open, when you're no longer blocking it with everything you're chasing just to feel safe or seen. You're not here to earn the right things. You're here to receive them. And that begins when you choose clarity over noise, presence over pursuit. When you let go of chasing what you think you should have, you make room for what's actually meant to stay. Chapter 9. Boundaries are not barriers. Protecting yourself isn't pushing others away. It's creating space for what truly belongs. For a long time, you might have thought boundaries were a sign of weakness or selfishness. Maybe you believed that if you said no, people would stop loving you, or that if you put limits on your time and energy, you miss out on opportunities or connection. So you push yourself to say yes to everything, to every request, every demand, every expectation. You try to be everything for everyone, convinced that your value depended on your availability. But chasing like that is exhausting. It leaves you feeling spread thin, resentful, and sometimes invisible, even when you're trying your hardest to be seen. When you finally stop chasing, you begin to realize that boundaries aren't walls. They're the gates that protect your garden, the fences that keep what matters in and what doesn't serve you out. Boundaries aren't about keeping people out. They're about keeping yourself in. When you set a boundary, you're saying, this is who I am. This is what I need to thrive. And that honesty doesn't repel the right people. It actually attracts them. It might be uncomfortable at first. You might worry about how others will react. But the truth is, people who truly care about you won't resent your boundaries. They'll respect them. They'll appreciate the clarity. They'll show up in ways that honor your limits. Boundaries give you the power to say no to the noise and yes to your own well-being. They help you protect your energy, focus, and emotional health. They allow you to be present for the things and people who really matter. Without boundaries, chasing becomes endless and fruitless. You're constantly running after approval or trying to fill a void that can't be filled by external sources. You're saying yes to obligations that drain you and no to your own needs. With boundaries, chasing loses its grip on you. You start to reclaim your time and your peace. You start choosing relationships where mutual respect is the foundation. You step away from toxic dynamics where your generosity is taken for granted. You make room for joy instead of obligation. And here's the paradox. When you protect yourself with boundaries, you become more available, not less. More available to authentic connection. More available to your own growth. More available to the moments that truly nourish you. Boundaries help you stop chasing by teaching you to guard what's yours, your time, your energy, your heart, so you can show up fully where it matters most. They remind you that love and respect aren't about sacrifice or erasure. They're about balance and honor. So when you stop chasing, learn to hold your boundaries gently but firmly. They are not barriers to love, they are the doorway to freedom. Chapter 10. Peace is the new pursuit. When you stop chasing, you start moving toward peace. For years, chasing might have felt like the only way forward, like the relentless engine that powered your days, the thing that made you feel alive, even if it also wore you down. But what if there was another way? A way that didn't require exhaustion or compromise. A way that wasn't about proving yourself or meeting endless expectations. When you finally stop chasing, you discover that peace, not hustle, not achievement, not approval, is what you were really seeking all along. Peace isn't passive. It's not giving up or settling. It's not the absence of effort. It's a profound kind of presence, a state where you feel grounded, whole, and enough. You realize that peace doesn't come from external things, from the next job, the right relationship, the perfect moment. It comes from within. When you stop chasing, you begin to create space for peace to enter. You step back from the noise, the pressure, the frantic pace. You learn to listen to yourself, to your body, to the rhythms of life around you. That space is where healing happens, where clarity grows, where the seeds of joy and contentment take root. You also come to see that peace isn't a destination, it's a practice. It's a daily choice to slow down, to breathe, to be kind to yourself when things don't go according to plan, to trust that you're enough just as you are. You learn that peace isn't about perfection, it's about acceptance. Acceptance of your imperfections, your failures, your humanity. Acceptance that life is messy and unpredictable, and that's okay. When you stop chasing, you let go of the idea that you must control everything to be safe. You begin to trust the flow of life, even when it's uncertain. And in that trust, peace blooms. It changes how you see the world and yourself. You become less reactive, less anxious, less caught up in comparison or fear. You start to experience moments of stillness that remind you of who you really are beyond the chasing, beyond the labels, the goals, the noise. And those moments become more frequent, more expansive. You come to realize that peace was never something to chase. It was always available, waiting for you to stop, breathe, and receive it. So now your pursuit shifts. You pursue presence. You pursue alignment. You pursue rest. You pursue the quiet joy of being fully here, fully alive, fully enough. Because when you stop chasing, you discover that peace is the greatest prize of all.